On a summer morning in Idaho, a mother watched her daughter leave with a family dog for a quick morning walk, not knowing it would be the last time she'd see either of them. Welcome back to the Criminal Minds. Police searches turned up nothing. Volunteers found no clues, and the case grew colder with each passing week. But then, 12 months later, a hunter tracking elk with thermal imaging technology captures something on his drone, triggering a chain of events that would expose a nightmare beyond anyone's darkest imagination. The doorbell's sharp chime cut through the early morning as quiet like a blade. Sydney Ewing wrapped her robe tighter around herself as she padded to the front door, her bare feet cold against the hardwood. Through the peephole, she saw Detective Marcus Holbrook standing on her porch, his breath visible in the crisp Idaho air. Her heart immediately plummeted. In the years since Ashley had vanished, every unexpected visit from law enforcement carried the weight of potential finality. Detective Holbrook, she said as she opened the door, unable to keep the tremor from her voice. Have you found it? Mrs. Ewing, may I come in? I have news about your daughter's case. She stepped aside wordlessly, leading him to the living room, where Ashley's junior year school photo still held prominence on the mantel. The detective's expression was unreadable as he settled into the armchair across from her. Early this morning, we received a call from a hunter named Dale Morrison. Detective Holbrook began pulling out his tablet. He was using a thermal drone to track elk migration patterns in the Coeur National Forest when his equipment picked up an unusual heat signature. Sydney's hands clenched in her lap. What kind of heat signature? At first, Mr. Morrison thought it was a coyote. The thermal imaging showed a medium-sized animal tied to a tree deep in the forest. But when he maneuvered the drone closer for a better look, the detective turned the tablet toward her, showing grainy thermal footage. The body shape and size were clearly that of a domestic dog, a golden retriever. To be specific, the world tilted. Sydney gripped the arm of the couch. Buddy, we believe so. The hunter immediately contacted us, and we dispatched a team. Mrs. Young, somehow after an entire year, your daughter's dog is still alive. That's impossible, Sydney whispered. How could he survive that long? Where's Ashley? Is she? We're mobilizing search teams immediately, Detective Holbrook said quickly. Every available unit is being deployed to that area. But I need to tell you that the dog has already been rescued. He's at the Northern Idaho Emergency Veterinary Clinic on Highway 95. He's alive, Mrs. Ewing. And from what the rescue team reported, he's been cared for. Sydney was already standing, her mind racing. Cared for? What do you mean cared for? I think it's best if you see for yourself. I can drive you there now if you'd like. 20 minutes later, they pulled into the veterinary clinic's parking lot. Sydney barely waited for the detective to park before she was out of the car, rushing through the glass doors. The receptionist, recognizing the urgency in her face, immediately led them back to an examination room. Dr. Sarah Chong, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, was bent over a golden retriever on the examination table. Even from behind, even after a year, Sydney knew it was Buddy. His coat was matted in places, his frame thinner, but it was unmistakably him. Mrs. Ewing, Dr. Chong said gently, stepping aside. He's sedated right now, just to keep him calm while we examine him, but he's going to be okay. Sydney's hands shook as she reached out to touch Buddy's fur. He was real warm, breathing alive. How? She managed to ask. Dr. Chang's expression grew puzzled. That's what's remarkable about this case. Despite obvious trauma and the circumstances, Buddy shows clear signs of regular feeding over the past year. When we pumped his stomach, we found recent food. Looks like dried dog food, probably from within the last 12 hours. His body condition is actually relatively good, all things considered. Someone has definitely been caring for him. Someone was keeping him alive. Detective Holbrook said quietly. The question is who and why? Sydney's fingers found the rope burns around Buddy's neck. Fresh and raw. These marks. Yes, from being tied to the tree. But look here. Dr. Chong pointed to Buddy's collar. This isn't the collar he was wearing when he disappeared. Is it? Sidney stared at the blue collar. Plain and tagless number. He had a red leather collar with his tags, his name, our address, my phone number. This is different. Someone changed it. Detective Holbrook said, making notes. Someone who didn't want him identified if he was found too soon. But why keep him alive at all? Sidney asked, her voice breaking. If someone took Ashley, why feed her dog for a year? Why tie him up where he could be found? The detective's jaw tightened. Those are questions we intend to answer. The search teams are already converging on the area where Buddy was found. If Ashley is out there, if there's any trace of her, we'll find it. Dr. Chong gently stroked Buddy's head. He's been through a lot, but he's a fighter. I'd like to keep him here for observation for at least 24 hours, run some more tests, but physically he's going to recover. Sidney nodded numbly, unable to tear her eyes away from the dog, who had been her daughter's constant companion. Buddy had been Ashley's 16th birthday present just 2 years ago. They'd been inseparable, taking their morning walks together every Saturday without fail until that Saturday morning last July, when neither of them came home. Mrs. Ewing, Detective Holbrook said softly, this is the strongest lead we've had. Someone kept this dog alive for a reason. That someone knows what happened to Ashley. As Sidney stood in that sterile examination room, watching Buddy's chest rise and fall with each sedated breath, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in months. Hope. Terrible, fragile hope that somewhere out there, someone had kept her daughter as alive as they kept her dog. The phone rang just as Sidney was getting home from the veterinary clinic. She'd spent the last hour sitting with Buddy, watching his sedated form and trying to process the morning's revelations. Principal Janet Morrison's name appeared. On the caller ID, Sidney, I just heard the news from the police department. Principal Morrison's voice was breathless with urgency about Ashley's dog being found. The entire Lakeland High School community wants to help. We're organizing volunteer search. Parties to sweep the forest area where the dog was discovered. We're hoping to find any trace of Ashley. Janet, Sidney's voice caught. Thank you. Several teachers are already on their way to your house to coordinate. We're not going to waste a moment. Ashley is one of ours, and we're going to bring her home. Within 30 minutes, Sidney's quiet suburban home had transformed into a command center. Cars lined the street as teachers, staff, and parent volunteers arrived with maps, first aid kits, and walkie-talkies. Her Kit Chong table was covered with topographical maps of the Coeur National Forest, and someone had set up a coffee station on the counter. Jim Rodriguez, the school's head football coach who was serving as search coordinator, stood at the head of the table with a laser pointer. All right, everyone, listen up. We're going to divide into teams of 6. Each team will be assigned a grid section radiating out from where Buddy was found. He pointed to a red X on the map. This is approximately 15 miles northeast of town near Bunko Road. It's rough terrain, folks. Among the gathered volunteers, Sidney noticed Mr. Tobias Chandler, Ashley's AP biology teacher. He stood slightly apart from the others, studying the maps with intense concentration, unlike the other teachers who'd arrived in casual clothes suitable for hiking. Mr. Chandler wore technical gear that looked brand new, moisture, wicking shirt, convertible pants, and high-end hiking boots. Mrs. Ewing, Mr. Chandler approached her with a sympathetic expression. I want you to know how deeply this has affected all of us at school. Ashley is such a special student. Thank you, Mr. Chandler. She always enjoyed your class. His eyes brightened with something that might have been pride. She's remarkably dedicated to her AP biology studies. I remember her staying after class just last year asking about the prerequisites for pre-med programs. She always wanted to make you proud. Sidney blinked, surprised by the specific memory. She talked to you about pre-med. Oh, yes, quite frequently. She was particularly anxious about getting into the University of Washington's program, said it was her dream school, but she worried her grades might not be competitive enough. I assured her that with her work ethic and natural intelligence, she had nothing to worry about. He paused, his expression growing, more intent. She mentioned feeling pressure to succeed, especially after your family's recent changes. The reference to her divorce made Sidney stiffen slightly. She didn't recall Ashley being that open with her teachers about personal matters. "I'd like to volunteer to lead Search Team C," Mr. Chandler announced to the room, pulling out a handheld GPS unit from his backpack. "I'll take the Eastern Quadrant. I've been researching search and rescue protocols extensively overnight, and I brought emergency supplies, flares, emergency blankets, water purification tablets." Coach Rodriguez looked impressed. "That's thorough preparation, Tobias. We appreciate the initiative." Mr. Chandler spread out a detailed topographical map he'd apparently printed himself with elevations and trail markers highlighted. The eastern section has several ravines and dense undergrowth. It requires someone with hiking experience to navigate safely. "Where would you like me?" Sydney asked, moving closer to the table. Mr. Chandler looked up quickly. "Oh, I think you should join Team A heading north, Mrs. Ewing. That terrain is more manageable, mostly established trails. The eastern route, where I'll be going, is quite challenging. Steep grades, loose rocks. We wouldn't want you getting injured when Ashley needs you to be strong." Something about the way he steered her away from his search area made Sydney pause, but Coach Rodriguez was already nodding in agreement. He's right. Team A will cover the northern section. That's where the old logging roads are. Easier terrain. As the teams formed up and prepared to depart, Sydney watched Mr. Chandler efficiently organize his team, distributing supplies and giving what sounded like practice safety briefing. For a high school science teacher, he seemed remarkably prepared for this exact scenario, as if he'd been planning for it. "Well, find her, Mrs. Ewing," he said as he passed her on the way out, his hand briefly touching her shoulder. "I promise you, we'll search every inch of that forest. Ashley deserves to come home." Before the search teams departed, there was a lull as volunteers gathered their gear and finalized transportation arrangements. Sydney found herself at the Kit Chong table with Mr. Chandler and a few other teachers, reviewing the search grid one. More time. The science teacher had pulled his chair close to hers, pointing out various landmarks on his detailed map. "You know, Mrs. Ewing," Mr. Chandler said, his voice taking on a confident tone, "I've been thinking about all my conversations with Ashley over the past year. There might be places," she mentioned, "that could help narrow our search." "What kind of conversations?" Sydney asked, grateful for any potential leads. "Well, she often talked about her college goals during our sessions. She was deeply anxious about getting into a good pre-med program." He leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "She specifically mentioned her fear of disappointing you, especially after your husband left 3 years ago. She felt like she had to be perfect to make up for all the upheaval." Sydney's breath caught. The divorce had been finalized 3 years ago. Yes, but Ashley had been so stoic about it. She'd never expressed those feelings to Sydney directly. "She told you about that?" "Oh, yes. We talked quite extensively. Her perfectionism was really weighing on her. She'd say things like, 'Mama's been through so much. I can't let her down.' And, 'What if I'm not smart enough for medical school?' She was putting tremendous pressure on herself." Mrs. Patterson, the English teacher, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "I didn't realize Ashley was struggling that much. She always seemed so confident in class. She opened up during our tutoring sessions," Mr. Chandler explained. "One-on-one environments tend to make students more comfortable sharing their concerns." "I'm so grateful for those tutoring sessions," Sydney said, touching his arm briefly. Her biology grades improved so much from B's to A's. Those Monday and Wednesday sessions really made a difference. Mr. Chandler's expression flickered for just a moment before he smiled. "Actually, we met on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I remember specifically because those were my designated tutoring days." Sydney frowned. "No, I'm certain it was Mondays and Wednesdays. Those were my late shifts at the hospital. I remember because I'd leave dinner in the fridge for her on those nights." "Memory can be tricky during stressful times," Mr. Chandler said smoothly, "but I'm quite certain it was Tuesdays and Thursdays. In fact, Ashley preferred studying in the science prep room rather than the library because it was quieter, more private for concentrated learning." "The prep room?" Coach Rodriguez interjected. "Isn't that usually off limits to students?" I made an exception for dedicated students like Ashley. She actually helped me organize supplies while we reviewed material. Kinesthetic learning, it helped her retain information better. Mr. Chandler's voice took on an almost nostalgic quality. She earned quite a bit of extra credit by staying after school to help prepare lab experiments. Such a dedicated young woman. Sydney felt a strange unease creeping up her spine. The way he spoke about these private sessions, the detailed knowledge of her daughter's inner thoughts, it seemed beyond what a typical teacher-student relationship would involve. How often did these prep room sessions happen? She asked carefully. Oh, quite regularly. Sometimes she'd stay until 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, especially when we were preparing for big exams. She was determined to maintain her average. He smiled, but there was something in his eyes that made Sydney's skin prickle. I told her that with her natural intelligence and my guidance, she could achieve anything she set her mind to. Mr. Chandler's phone face up on the table suddenly buzzed with an incoming text. Before he could grab it, Sydney caught a glimpse of the preview notification. Stick to the plan. He quickly flipped the phone over, his movement just a bit. Too swift, too nervous. Probably other teachers checking in about the search, he said, but his voice had taken on a slightly higher pitch. Aren't you going to answer it? Mrs. Patterson asked. Could be important for the search. Coordination. No. I'm sure it's nothing urgent. We should focus on the task at hand. He turned back to the map, but Sydney noticed his hands were no longer quite steady as he pointed to various sectors. The unease in Sydney's stomach was growing stronger. The personal details he knew, the confusion about the tutoring schedule, the private sessions in restricted areas, and now this cryptic text message. Individually, they might mean nothing, but together they painted a picture that made her deeply uncomfortable. Mr. Chandler, she said slowly, did Ashley ever mention any specific places in the forest where she liked to hike? Any trails she particularly enjoyed? His eyes met hers, and for just a moment, she saw something flicker in them. Calculation, fear? No, she wasn't much of an outdoors person. Preferred her books to hiking boots. That's why this whole disappearance is so puzzling. It wasn't like her to go off trail. But Sydney knew that was a lie. Ashley loved hiking and had been on the trail team sophomore year. Either Mr. Chandler didn't know her daughter as well as he claimed, or he was deliberately being deceptive. Neither option sat well with her. The commotion in her driveway grew louder as search teams loaded equipment into vehicles. Through the living room window, Sydney could see Mr. Chandler directing his team with practiced efficiency, distributing walkie-talkies and checking backpacks. Something about the conversation at the Kit Chong table gnawed at her. Those inconsistencies about the tutoring schedule, the unsettling familiarity with which he spoke about her daughter's inner thoughts. Unable to shake her growing disc, Sydney slipped away from the crowd and climbed the stairs to Ashley's room. She'd left it largely untouched since the disappearance, a shrine to her missing daughter. The bed was still made with the purple comforter Ashley had picked out for her 16th birthday. Her desk sat exactly as she'd left it that July morning. Laptop closed, pencil cup full, textbooks stacked neatly on the shelf above. Sydney pulled open the desk drawer where Ashley kept her academic planner. Her daughter had always been meticulous about scheduling, a trait inherited from her father. The planner was a thick, spiral-bound book with monthly and weekly views, its pages, filled with Ashley's neat handwriting in various colored pens. Flipping back to the previous school year, Sydney found September and began searching for any mention of tutoring sessions there in the second week of September, written in blue ink, Science Help, Mr. C, 330, room 214. But it was on a Monday, not Tuesday or Thursday, as Mr. Chandler had insisted. Her fingers trembled as she continued through the pages. Another entry 2 weeks later, again on a Monday, then a Wednesday session in early October with a note. Cancel, Mr. C, has meeting rescheduled to Friday. The pattern that emerged was nothing like the regular Tuesday, Thursday schedule he described. The sessions were scattered, sporadic, and frequently rescheduled at his request. Sydney found Ashley's progress report cards tucked into the planner's pockets. In September, Her biology grade was A, solid B, by October. When these after-school sessions became more frequent, according to the planner, it had jumped to an A. By November, perfect scores across the board. She turned back to the October weekly pages, reading more carefully. Now in the margins, Ashley had made little notes in purple pen. Her favorite color for personal. Thoughts. October 15th. Mr. C says I'm special, different from other students. October 22nd. Earned my today. Mr. C. So proud. The language made Sydney's stomach turn. Earned? What did that mean? Moving. Into November. She found more concerning. Entries. Several lunch periods were marked with science prep room organizing supplies, but with time notations that didn't make sense. 12 to 12:45, when Lakeland High's lunch period was only 30 minutes long. Another entry showed 12 to 12:50 with a note, late to English, but Mr. C wrote me a pass. Her hands were shaking now as she reached November 18th. There, in Ashley's careful script, was an entry that made her blood run cold. Mr. C gave me the pink bracelet for being his best student today. So pretty. He said not to show Mom because other kids would be jealous and might say mean things. Our special secret. A bracelet. Sydney had never seen any. Pink bracelet. She frantically flipped. Through more pages, finding scattered, references to gifts and privileges that seemed inappropriate. December 3rd. Mr. C let me use his personal laptop for research during lunch. He trusts me so much. December 10th. Found our secret study spot today. Mr. C says it's just for his special students. Had to promise not to tell anyone, not even Jess. Jess was Ashley's best friend. They told each other everything, or at least Sydney had thought they did. The December 15th entry was longer, taking up the entire notes section for that day. Mr. C explained why our tutoring is different from what other kids get. He says, I have potential that needs special nurturing away from the mediocre masses. His words. The secret study spot is perfect. No interruptions, no jealous kids watching. He says, by senior year, I'll be so far ahead of everyone else that getting into UW will be easy. Mom will be so proud. We just have to keep our methods private. Mr. C says people wouldn't understand how special our connection is. Sydney's legs gave out, and she sank. Onto Ashley's bed, the planner clutched in her trembling hands. The language, the secrecy, the gifts, the isolated meetings, all painted a picture of grooming that made her physically ill. How had she missed this? How had the school missed this? Through the window, she could hear car doors slamming as the search teams prepared to leave. Mr. Chandler's voice carried up from the driveway, authoritative and confident, as he gave last-minute instructions to his team. The same voice that had whispered to her daughter about being special, that had lured her into secret meetings with gifts and promises. Sydney's mind raced. Should she call Detective Holbrook? But what if she was wrong? What if she was just a paranoid mother reading too much into innocent teacher-student interactions? The entries were concerning, but not explicitly criminal. And if she was right, if Mr. Chandler had been grooming Ashley, what did that mean for her disappearance? The sound of engines starting below made her decision urgent. The search teams were about to leave, including Mr. Chandler's team heading to the eastern quadrant, the area he'd specifically steered her away from. Sydney tucked the planner into her jacket and hurried downstairs, her mind made up. The search teams were loading into their vehicles, volunteers checking equipment and confirming radio frequencies. She spotted her assigned team, a gathering near Coach Rodriguez's SUV, but her eyes were fixed to Mr. Chandler as he walked toward his silver Honda Accord. Mrs. Ewing, we're about ready to head out, called Mrs. Patterson from Team A. I'll be right there, Sydney replied, moving toward her own car instead. I just need to grab something from my vehicle. She slipped into her Toyota Camry and started the engine, watching through her rear-view mirror as Mr. Chandler's Honda pulled out of her driveway. Team C was supposed to head northeast, toward the forest toward Bunko Road, where Buddy had been found. But as Sydney eased onto the street, maintaining a careful distance, she watched Mr. Chandler turn south onto Highway 95, the complete opposite direction. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. Where was he going? She followed at a distance, keeping at least 2 cars between them when possible. The Sunday afternoon traffic was light enough that she could track his silver Honda without getting too close. About 3 miles down Highway 95, Mr. Chandler suddenly pulled into a gas station. Sydney's heart pounded as she drove past, not daring to stop. In her side mirror, she saw him get out of his car and look around the parking lot, his posture tense and watchful. She pulled into a McDonald's parking lot a 4 mile down and waited, watching the road. 5 minutes later, his Honda appeared again, continuing south. This time, she let 3 cars get between them before pulling back onto the highway. They drove for another 2 miles before Mr. Chandler made another unexpected stop, this time at a seemingly abandoned fruit stand on the side of the road. He didn't get out, just sat there for a full minute. Sydney pulled off onto a side road, partially hidden behind a cluster of pine trees, and watched him through her binoculars, a pair she bought for Ashley's brief interest in bird watching. Mr. Chandler was checking his mirrors repeatedly, his head swiveling left and right. He was looking for someone. Looking for her? After another minute, he pulled back onto the highway. Sydney's mouth was dry as she continued. Following him, he turned west onto Rimrock Road, a winding two-lane that led toward the older residential areas on the outskirts of town. She knew this area. It was where many of the original settler homes still stood, craftsman-style houses from the early 1900s scattered among newer developments. She had to fall back further now, the lighter traffic making her car more conspicuous. The Honda disappeared around curves, reappeared on straightaways, leading her deeper into the rural landscape. After about 4 miles, she saw his turn signal flash as he pulled into a gravel driveway. Sydney drove past, not slowing, and caught a glimpse of an old craftsman house set back from the road, partially hidden by overgrown rhododendrons. She continued for another 1/4 mile before finding a place to turn around, then parked on the shoulder behind a stand of Douglas firs. Her phone still had decent signal out here. With trembling fingers, she searched the address she'd glimpsed on the mailbox. 4847 Rimrock Road. The county assessor's website loaded. Slowly, but finally the property information appeared. Owner, estate of Ella Laner Chandler. Date of death, November 2019. Beneficiary, Tobias Chandler. Her heart was hammering now. She refined her search, finding Ella Laner Chandler's obituary. A retired school teacher preceded in death by her husband, William, survived by her grandson, Tobias. The property had been in the Chandler family since 1947. A quick search on Zillow showed more disturbing information. The house had been listed as a rental property in March 2020, just months after Ella Laner's death. Charming 3-bedroom craftsman on 2 acres, perfect for someone seeking rural tranquility. But the listing status had changed to temporarily off-market on June 15th, 2023. Sydney did the math quickly. Ashley had disappeared on July 8th, 2023, less than a month after Mr. Chandler had pulled his grandmother's house off the rental market. She crept back toward the property on foot, staying in the tree line. From her hidden vantage point, she could see the house more clearly. It appeared well-maintained, the yard mowed, the paint fresh, but newspapers were accumulated on the front porch. She could see them from here, a small pile that suggested about a week's worth, as if someone was maintaining the property, but not actually living there full time. Fresh tire tracks in a gravel driveway caught her attention, not just from Mr. Chandler's Honda, which was now parked near the detached garage. There was another set, slightly older, but still recent, leading to the back of the property. The house looked empty despite Mr. Chandler's presence. No lights on. Despite the cloudy afternoon, no movement in the windows, but he'd entered with a key confidently, like someone who came here regularly. Where was he supposed to be right now? Leading a search team through the eastern quadrant of the forest, looking for traces of her daughter. Instead, he was here at a house he'd taken off the rental market 3 weeks before Ashley vanished. Sydney crouched behind a thick cluster of huckleberry bushes, Her phone in her hand. Detective Holbrook's. Number on the screen. Her thumb hovered over the call button. What would she say? That she followed a teacher to his grandmother's house instead of joining the search. That she had a feeling something was wrong based on some planner entries and the fact that he'd driven the opposite direction from where he was supposed to be. She could imagine the detective's response. Did you see anything criminal? Do you have evidence of a crime? And what did she really have? A teacher at a house he legally owned. Concerning but vague diary entries. A bad feeling in her gut, number she needed more before she made. That call, if she was wrong, if this was all paranoid delusion brought on by grief and the morning shock of finding Buddy alive, she'd not only embarrass herself, but potentially derail the actual search efforts. And if she was right, she couldn't risk Mr. Chandler being alerted and potentially harming Ashley. Sydney backed away from her hiding spot and made her way to her car. She drove back down Rimrock Road, looking for a better vantage point. About a quarter mile from the Chandler property, she spotted an abandoned barn, its red paint peeling and roof partially collapsed. A rutted dirt path led behind it. Perfect. She parked her Camry behind the barn, hidden from the road, and began making her way back toward the house on foot. The forest was thick here, Douglas firs and cedars, creating a natural screen. She moved carefully, avoiding dry branches, grateful for the soft forest floor dampened by recent rain. The back of the Chandler property came into view through the trees. From this angle, she could see details she'd missed from the front. The basement level of the house was more visible here, where the ground sloped away. Most of the basement windows had been replaced with glass blocks, the thick, opaque kind that let in light but prevented anyone from seeing in or out. It was an unusual modification for a rental property, but there was one small window that hadn't been fully blocked. A ventilation window, maybe 8 inches high and 2 feet wide, still glass, but with what looked like curtains hanging inside. Fresh concrete patches around the foundation caught her eye. Someone had done recent work here, sealing gaps or perhaps reinforcing the foundation. The concrete looked maybe a few months old, its color still lighter than the original foundation. Sydney crept closer, using the overgrown rhododendrons as cover. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure it could be heard from the house. When she reached the ventilation window, she had to crouch low, the window being only about a foot above ground level. Here was a small gap where the curtains didn't quite meet. She pressed her face close to glass, cupping her hands around her eyes to block the afternoon light. What she saw made her blood freeze. It was unmistakably a classroom setup. A whiteboard on the far wall covered in writing, a desk with textbooks stacked neatly on its surface, and hanging on the back of the desk chair, Ashley's purple backpack, the one with the small rip on the front pocket that she'd patched with a smiley face iron-on, the one she'd taken with her on that last morning walk because she planned to stop at the library after. Sydney's vision blurred with tears, but she forced herself to focus, to catalog everything she could see. The textbooks were definitely from Lakeland High. She recognized the AP biology text, the same edition Ashley used. The whiteboard was covered in notes about cellular respiration, the handwriting unmistakably Mr. Chandler's same precise script she'd seen on Ashley's return assignments. The room looked lived in. There was a small refrigerator in one corner, a microwave on top of it, a narrow bed against a stone wall, and those were definitely old stone walls, suggesting this had once been a root cellar, a door that must lead to a bathroom based on the PVC pipe she could see running along the ceiling. Movement in her peripheral vision made her freeze. Mr. Chandler descended what must be stairs outside her field of view, carrying a tray. She could see sandwiches, a glass of milk, an apple cut into slices, the way Ashley always liked them. He moved out of view toward the area under the stairs where she couldn't see, but she could hear his voice muffled to the glass, but still audible. "I brought lunch. Turkey and Swiss, your favorite?" There was a response, a young female. Voice too quiet to make out the words. "Your mother still hasn't figured it out," Mr. Chandler continued, his voice taking on that same confidential tone she'd heard at her kitchong table. but we need to be more careful now that they found the dog. Another response, longer this time. The tone wasn't panicked or pleading. It sounded resigned, weary, like someone having a conversation they'd had many times before. I know you miss him, Mr. Chandler said, but it was necessary. We couldn't have him leading them here too soon. You understand that, don't you? Everything I do is to protect you, to protect what we're building together. The female voice again, and this time, Sydney, caught a few words carried on the draft from the ventilation window. Mom won the assignments. Your mother will understand eventually, Mr. Chandler replied. When you graduate with perfect scores, when you get into medical school, when you become everything you're capable of becoming, she'll see that I was right. That traditional school was holding you back. Our way is better. Sydney pressed her, hand over her mouth to stifle a sob. Ashley, her baby girl, was down there alive, but imprisoned in this man's delusion. Based on the stone walls and the narrow window, it had to be a converted root cellar, probably dating back to the house's original construction. A perfect prison, soundproof, windowless, except for that small ventilation gap, invisible from the road. She had to call for help now. This was evidence, real evidence. Her daughter was alive. Sydney's hand shook violently as she pulled out her phone, still crouched beneath the basement window. She backed away slowly, trying to put distance between herself and the house while maintaining sight of the back door. The HVAC unit, humming softly near the corner of the house, provided some cover. She pressed herself against its metal surface and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's calm voice seemed surreal against the pounding of Sydney's heart. This is Sydney Ewing, she whispered urgently. My daughter Ashley has been missing. For a year. I'm at 4847 Rimrock Road, and I can see her. She's being held in the basement by her teacher, Tobias Chandler. Ma'am, I need you to speak up. Did you say you can see your missing daughter? The dispatcher, her name tag would later show Bethany Cole, was already typing, alerting units. Yes, she's in the basement. I saw her backpack. Heard him talking to her. It's 4847 Rimrock. Sydney shifted her weight to spell out the street name more clearly, and her foot came down on something that cracked like a gunshot in the quiet afternoon. She looked down in horror at the shattered decorative solar light, its plastic housing split end glass, scattered on the ground. The back door slammed open with such force it bounced off the wall. Mr. Chandler stood there, his face twisted with rage, his normally composed features distorted. I know you're there, he shouted, his eyes scanning the yard. Sydney, you followed me. You couldn't just trust me. To search for her, could you? Sydney ran. Phone still pressed her ear. She sprinted toward the tree line, hearing the dispatcher's urgent voice asking for her location. Rimrock Road, 4847. Send help now. He's chasing her, on a route, and she went down hard, the phone flying from her hand. She scrambled to grab it, but Mr. Chandler was already there snatching it up. With a wordless sound of fury, he hurled it against the brick siding of the house. The phone exploded into pieces. You don't understand, he shouted as Sydney regained her feet and ran. You never understood what Ashley really needs. The pressure you put on her, the mediocre education at that school. I'm protecting her from a world that doesn't appreciate gifted students like her. Sydney crashed through the underbrush, branches tearing at her clothes and skin. She could hear him behind her, his new hiking boots crushing through the forest debris. Her car. She had to reach her car. She was dying inside. His voice was getting closer, drowning in busy work and standardized tests when she could be truly learning. I gave her what you couldn't. Individual attention, real education, a chance to reach her full potential. The abandoned barn came into view, and Sydney put on a burst of speed, her legs burning. She could see her Camry, just 50 feet away. She yanked the door open and threw herself inside, slamming the locks just as Mr. Chandler reached the vehicle, his fists pounded. On the window. She wants to be there. She's thriving. You'll destroy everything we built. Sydney started the engine and threw it in reverse, gravel spraying as she backed away from him. In her rear view mirror, she saw him running to his Honda. She spun the wheel, tires squealing as she headed for the main road. Her mind raced as fast as her car. The dispatcher had gotten the address. She said it twice, spelled Rimrock. That had to be enough. They would send units. They had to. She careened onto Rimrock Road, taking the curves too fast. In her mirrors, she could see the silver Honda pursuing Mr. Chandler, driving with the same terrifying intensity he'd shown in the yard. At the intersection with Cedar Lane, she took a hard right, tires screaming. He followed closer now. A residential neighborhood opened up before her, and she won through it, running stop signs, praying no children were playing in the streets. Left on Maple, right on 3rd, another left onto Pine. But he knew these roads, too, stayed with her through every turn. Highway 95 appeared ahead, and she merged into traffic without looking, horns blaring around her. The Honda followed, cutting off a pickup truck to stay on her tail. But the heavier traffic worked in her favor. She could weave between cars while he got stuck, behind a slow-moving RV. By the time she reached the Walmart intersection, she'd lost sight of him. She pulled into the parking lot and drove to the far corner, parking between two large trucks where a car wouldn't be easily visible from the road. Her whole body was shaking, adrenaline making her feel sick. She had no phone, no way to know if help was coming. All she could do was wait and pray that Bethany Cole had understood enough to send help. 20 minutes later, Officer James Wright of the Fountain County Sheriff's Department was the first to spot the silver Honda Accord returning to 4847 Rimrock Road. 2 other units were already in position, having arrived minutes earlier to find the property seemingly empty. They'd been about to force entry when the Honda appeared. Mr. Chandler saw the police cars too late. He tried to reverse, but Officer Wright's unit blocked him in. Within seconds, officers had him out of the car and in handcuffs. His composed teacher persona finally completely shattered. "You don't understand," he screamed as they read him his rights. "She needs me, her education, her future. I'm the only one who truly understands her potential." The officers ignored his ravings as they searched the property. The main floor revealed nothing unusual, but in the basement, Deputy Sarah Martinez noticed something odd about the water heater closet. The heater itself was pushed strangely forward and behind it. "Got a door here," she called out. It was cleverly concealed, painted to match the wall, with a sophisticated lock. Mechanism. Mr. Chandler's keys opened it, revealing a narrow hallway that led to another door. This one is steel with a deadbolt that is locked from the outside. Officer Wright opened it carefully, announcing himself. "Ashley, this is the police. We're here to help you." The room beyond was exactly as Sydney had described, a converted root cellar turned into a bizarre classroom prison. And there, sitting at the desk with a pencil in her hand, was Ashley Ewing. She looked up at the officers with hollow eyes, her face pale from a year without sunlight. She was thin but not emaciated, dressed in clean clothes that looked too big for a frame. In her hands, she clutched a notebook filled with line after line of neat handwriting. "I need to finish this assignment," she said, her voice rusty from disuse. "Mr. C says I can't get into college if I don't maintain my perfect GPA. I have a test tomorrow on cellular mitosis. Ashley, honey, you're safe now." Officer Wright said gently, moving slowly into the room. "Your mom sent us. You're going home." "Home?" She looked confused, almost frightened. "But I have homework. 3 chapters to read, 2 lab reports to write. Mr. C says if I fall behind, I'll never catch up. The other students are already so far ahead." Deputy Martinez had to blink back tears as she watched the 17-year-old girl clutch her notebook like a lifeline, months of completed assignments visible in its pages. The desperate work of a child trying to earn her freedom through perfect grades, not understanding that no amount of A's would ever be enough for the man who'd stolen her life. "Well, make sure your work is safe," Officer Wright promised, gently coaxing the notebook from her hands. "But right now we need to get you to your mom. She's been looking for you for so long." The fluorescent lights of Sinai Health Hospital seemed too bright after the dimness of the root cellar. Ashley sat on the examination bed, her thin frame drowning in a hospital gown while nurses drew blood and checked her vitals. She kept asking about her assignments, whether someone had brought her textbooks, if she could have just one pencil and paper to work on her calculus problems. In a conference room 3 floors down, Detective Marcus Holbrook sat across from Tobias Chandler. The science teacher's mask had finally completely crumbled. His hands were cuffed to the table, his shirt disheveled, his carefully styled hair now hanging limp across his forehead. "I want to explain," Chandler said, his voice taking on an almost pleading quality. "People won't understand, but I need someone to know the truth." Detective Holbrook activated his recorder. "Go ahead, Mr. Chandler. Tell me everything." "I noticed Ashley the first day she walked into my freshman biology class 3 years ago," Chandler began, his eyes distant with memory. "She wasn't like the other students. She had this hunger for approval, for perfection. Most kids her age are lazy, distracted. But Ashley, she hung on every word, took meticulous notes, and always stayed after class with questions. 'When did your relationship become inappropriate?' Holbrook asked, keeping his voice neutral despite his disgust. "I prefer to think of it as, when I recognized her true potential," Chandler corrected. "Her parents had just divorced. She was struggling with feelings of abandonment, of not being good enough. Her grades were slipping B's in most subjects. She came to me almost in tears one day, worried about her GPA." He leaned forward as if the detective might understand. "I saw an opportunity to help her. I told her about weighted grades, how with special attention and additional assignments I could ensure she got the A she needed. She was so grateful, so eager to prove herself worthy of that extra help." "You use her grades as leverage," Holbrook stated flatly. "I provided incentive." Chandler insisted. The lunch period session started innocently enough. She'd come to the science prep room and we'd review material, but she was so responsive to praise, so desperate for validation. When I told her she was special, different from the others, she bloomed like a flower in sunlight. The detective's jaw tightened. "When did you first assault her?" Chandler's face darkened. "It wasn't assault. It was connection. During our anatomy unit, I was explaining muscle groups, and I placed my hand on her shoulder to demonstrate. She didn't pull away. If anything, she leaned into the touch. After that, the boundaries became more fluid. A hand on her back while looking over her work, sitting closer than necessary, embracing her when she achieved perfect scores. And the kidnapping? That was never the plan," Chandler said, agitation creeping into his voice. "But in late June, during one of our sessions, Ashley mentioned her mother was considering a job in Spokane. They would move before her senior year. I couldn't let that happen. She was so close to perfection, to achieving everything we'd worked for. A move would destroy her progress, expose her to inferior teachers who wouldn't understand her needs." He described his preparations with disturbing pride. 3 months of work on his grandmother's root cellar, soundproofing the walls, installing a ventilation system that would keep air flowing without allowing sound to escape, a chemical toilet discreet enough to avoid suspicion when purchased, a mini fridge, and microwave for basic needs, education materials to continue her studies. "I told the neighbors I was renovating to rent the basement as a studio apartment." He continued. "They never questioned it. Why would they? I was a respected teacher, improving a family property." The day she disappeared, Holbrook prompted. "I knew her routine. Saturday morning walks with the dog on the Centennial Trail. Always the same route, same time. I intercepted her near the bridge where the trail is isolated. The chloroform was from old chemistry, supplies the school was supposed to have destroyed years ago. She didn't suffer. When she woke up, she was safe in her new classroom and the dog. A necessary misdirection. I'd scouted that location in the forest weeks before, remote enough that he wouldn't be found immediately, but eventually someone would discover him. It would focus the search far from the house. I went back periodically to feed him, keep him alive. A dead dog would end the search. A living dog would extend it. Keep hope alive while directing resources away from the truth." 2 floors up, forensic interviewer Dr. Patricia Vance sat with Ashley in a quiet room, designed to feel less clinical than the rest of the hospital. Sydney watched through one-way glass, tears streaming down her face as she listened to her daughter's flat, emotionless recitation. Mr. C explained everything that first day. Ashley said, her eyes focused on her hands. He said, Mom was relieved I was gone, that now she could date without worrying about setting a bad example, could save money instead of paying for college. He showed me a news article on his phone about runaways. Said that's how I'd been classified. Not missing, just another teenage runaway. How did that make you feel? Dr. Vance asked gently. Hurt at first, but then grateful. Mr. C said he was the only one who truly cared about my education, my future. He risked everything to give me individual attention, to prepare me for college without the distractions and inferior teaching at regular school. She described her daily routine with, disturbing normally. Wake at 6 a.m. breakfast, usually cereal or toast that he'd bring down mathematics from 7 to 9 science, until lunch afternoon for history, and English evening for test prep in college. Essays. He'd grade everything, providing detailed feedback, praise for perfection, disappointment for anything less. He gave me rewards for good performance. Ashley continued. The pink bracelet when I maintained straight as for a month, new books when I exceeded expectations, extra food variety for perfect test scores, screen time on his laptop for exceptional essays, always. Supervised, of course. Did you ever try to leave? Dr. Vance asked. Ashley looked confused by the question. Where would I go? I was a runaway. Mom didn't want me back. I'd missed so much school. I'd never catch up. Mr. C was preparing me for success out there. She gestured vaguely. I'd just be another failure. Dr. Helena Morrison, the trauma specialist, explained to Sydney that Ashley had developed severe Stockholm Syndrome. A year of complete isolation with only her captor for human contact, combined with his psychological manipulation, has fundamentally altered her perception of reality. She genuinely believes he was protecting her, that the outside world would reject her. When they finally allowed Sydney into the room, Ashley looked at her with eyes that seemed both young and impossibly old. Mom. Her voice was uncertain, as if she wasn't sure this was real. Oh, baby, Sydney sobbed, pulling her daughter into her arms. I never stopped looking. Not for one day. I love you so much. Ashley was stiff in her embrace at first, then slowly, like ice melting, she began to soften. He said you were glad, she whispered, that I was too much trouble, too expensive. Never, Sydney said fiercely. You are my whole world. Everything I did was to find you, to bring you home. Detective Holbrook entered quietly, nodding to Dr. Vance. We found everything, he said softly. The pink bracelet, the completed assignments, the college essays she wrote about why she was taking a gap year for independent study. The manipulation was comprehensive. Ashley pulled back from her mother slightly, anxiety creeping into her features. My assignments, did you save them? All that work. I need them for my transcripts. Her voice grew smaller, more frightened. Am I still going to get into college, even though I miss a year of real school? Mr. C said the homeschool curriculum was better, but what if colleges don't accept it? What if I ruin everything? Sydney held her daughter tighter, feeling the fragile bones beneath her hands, understanding that the physical rescue was only the beginning. The girl in her arms believed her worth was measured in perfect grades, that love was conditional on academic achievement, that a year of captivity was preferable to the risk of educational mediocrity. Healing from that would take far longer than healing from physical confinement. Well, figure out together, Sydney whispered, stroking Ashley's lank hair. Whatever you need, however long it takes. You're safe now. That's all that matters. But even as she said it, she could feel her daughter's tension, the fear that safety might not be enough if it came without the perfect GPA that had become her entire identity in that basement prison. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button to get more of this story. Tell us in the comments what should be done to the teacher. I will be waiting.